We're now going to create the basic elements that we'll need for our cameratic. And the first of these elements is a text that appears in shot 3, which is what I call the hero shot, and also the logo that appears in the end shot. These are both just basic extrusions of Adobe Illustrator files. And the process for creating Illustrator files is really straightforward, as long as you follow some simple rules. The first up is that you can only use Adobe Illustrator 8 files. Cinema 4D has to work with this older file format in order to get the path information into Cinema 4D. RGB files are good, CMYK files are bad. Cinema 4D cannot open a CMYK file, so you have to work in RGB color space. You can only use open or closed paths. No fill or stroke information, or gradients for that matter, will get translated into Cinema 4D. Only open or closed paths, no fill or stroke information or styles. The last rule is that Cinema 4D uses the Adobe Illustrator ruler for placement. We want to make sure that our files come into Cinema 4D at the center of the world, and the normal placement for the Adobe Illustrator ruler is in one of the corners. In the earlier versions of CS, it was in the bottom left corner, and in CS5, it's in the upper left corner. We want to make sure that our Illustrator ruler is in the center of the page. So as long as we follow these 4 basic rules, we'll get a really consistent result when we move between Cinema 4D and Illustrator. Let's start this process by creating the type elements for Cinema 4D. I'm going to open the Shark Zone type Adobe Illustrator file inside of Adobe Illustrator CS5. And what I have is the words shark and zone that I've typed out using the impact font. And I turned those fonts into outlines and then shaped them up a little bit so that the shark and zone create a nice little block here that will really look good when we place it on the floor in our scene inside of Cinema 4D. If we go back to our rules, we want to make sure that Cinema 4D uses the ruler. I've already created this document in an RGB color space, you can tell that. And I've converted my fonts to outlines. I want to have my shark and zone at the exact center of the page with a ruler that's centered on their shapes. So the easiest way to do that is to copy this type to the clipboard. I'm going to use Command-C to copy it to the clipboard. And I'm going to make a new document. Now, I always like to make my documents the same size as the finished rendering size inside of Cinema 4D. So I'll make this 640 points by 360 points. And there's no reason for that except for continuity. I like to make sure all of my Illustrator files come into the same size when I bring them from Illustrator into Cinema 4D. And so by creating my type elements at the same size as my finished rendering, it makes things consistently the same size. I made a mistake and created this as a CMYK, so I need to go back and change that. Let's go to the File menu and go to the Document Color mode and change that to RGB color. That's very important to do. So always make sure that this is RGB right here at the top of the window. Now I'll paste down that element that I copied from the other page, and now it's much larger than the screen. So let's back out just a bit and then use the transform handles to scale this down, and then Command-0, which is under the View menu, and it frames the entire image into the window. Now, one of the great things about Illustrator is that it's very consistent in its behavior, and I can use that behavior to my advantage. What I want to do is have the shark zone centered exactly on the page, and no matter where I place this, I always want to make sure that it comes back to the center of the page. I'm going to enlarge this type a little bit, and then cut it to the clipboard, Command-X, and then frame up the window again using the Command-0. And then when I paste this down, Illustrator automatically pastes things down in the center of the open view. So if I go Command-V now, I know that my shark zone is centered up exactly in the page because I centered my page in the view. Now I can reveal the ruler, Command-R on the keyboard or Control-R, and I can drag that ruler reset tool out and center those crosshairs right on the type using the transform handles as a guide. Now that I have the ruler centered up, and you can see that I have a 0 here and a 0 here on the top and left sides, I know my shark zone type will come up correctly in Cinema 4D. Let's go to the File menu now and save this in the correct format. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and in my Chapter 3 folder, I have a AI for C4D folder. Now that has my prepared files in it already. Let's make a new subfolder in here and call it Lesson AI for C4D. And let's call this one Shark Zone AI. Remember, Cinema 4D can only use an Illustrator 8 file, so when I hit save, I'm going to be presented with a secondary window here that asks me which version I would like to save it as. Now I'm going to save it all the way down as Illustrator 8, and then hit OK. Now you'll get a message here warning you about the older document type, and you can go ahead and hit OK and just ignore that, because this file format has everything we need in it. So that's it for the Shark Zone type. I can close that up and close up this Shark Zone. Now I can go to the actual Adventure Channel logo, and let's open the Adventure Channel logo in Adobe Illustrator. And it's a very simple shape, and if I copy that to the clipboard, Command C, let's make another new document. This time I'll twirl open the Advanced and make sure that I change the color mode to RGB right here, and double check my size, 640 by 360, which is just right. Hit OK, and then paste that down, Command V. Now it's too big, so we need to do the same thing, scale it down, and then center up the page, Command 0. Cut that to the clipboard and paste it down one more time. Now I know it's exactly in the center of the page, and if I bring up the rulers, Command R, and then reset that crosshair so that it's centered up right on the transform handles, and I can let go. Now I can save this, File, Save As, and in the Lesson AI for C4D, I will change that to be aclogo.ai, and then make sure that it is in fact an Illustrator 8 file. There we go, and hit OK on that warning. So that's it for the type and logo elements. Let's move over to Cinema 4D and get those things imported. Now that we have the properly prepared Adobe Illustrator files, it's going to be really easy to import these into Cinema 4D.